Shun Jinan came to the minister's residence to break off the engagement, and then sought to marry my half-sister. From then on, I became the laughingstock of the entire capital. In order for my half-sister to marry Shintunan, my father declared that I had become mentally impaired. Everyone knew that I had been cast aside and likely wouldn't survive until spring. Little did they know, I still had a trump card to turn the tables. I sneaked into the Prince Su's mansion and found Prince Su Chi Yuan. Known as the living king of hell, I grabbed his sleeve and cooed, "Are you still willing to marry me?" At noon the next day, the imperial decree of marriage arrived. I knew this was his answer. I am the only legitimate daughter of the Minister of State. When my father married my mother, he was the third-place scholar of that year. My mother was the daughter of the general's mansion at the time, and she fell in love with my father at first sight. At that time, General Lin had only my mother as his daughter and doted on her immensely. Thus, he arranged for my mother to be married to my father. From then on, his official career was smooth sailing, all the way up to the position of minister. In the second year after my father became minister, my maternal grandfather and 3 uncles all died in battle. At that time, I had just turned 7. Before the memorial tablets of my grandfather and uncles could be brought back to the capital, my father couldn't wait to bring home his childhood sweetheart. It was only then that my mother learned that my father had been keeping a mistress all along. Moreover, the mistress had already given birth to a son and a daughter. My grandfather had passed away, and my mother knew she no longer had anyone to rely on. By then, my father had risen to the position of minister. On one side was the general's mansion, left without a master, and on the other was the newly appointed minister. It was clear at a glance who would hold more power in the future. Thus, when my father brought the Kui family into the minister's residence, he did not inform my mother. For the next 2 years, it was relatively peaceful. My father, relying on the emperor's pity for the Lin family, which now only had my mother left, firmly established himself in the capital. When people's attention gradually shifted from the General Lin's residence to the new General Shun's residence, my father sent my mother and me, who was only 10 years old at the time, to the body temple. My father publicly claimed that my mother had voluntarily left home to practice asceticism in order to pray for blessings for her family, and I, Song Yuntang, missing my mother dearly and wanting to care for her, deliberately followed along. My marriage arrangement with Shun Jinan was personally decided by the Emperor and General Shun when I was 13 years old. It is said that General Shun was a disciple of my maternal grandfather, and upon learning that I was my grandfather's only descendant, he pleaded with the Emperor to facilitate this matter. The marriage between the legitimate daughter of the minister's household and the legitimate son of the general's household is, by all accounts, a beautiful tale. When I received this imperial decree, Qi Yuan was with me by the lakeside at the foot of the mountain, skipping stones. Qi Yuan was the son of noble consort Yi in the palace, who died from a difficult childbirth after giving birth to him. It is said that noble consort Yi was the emperor's true love in this lifetime, and the two had already developed feelings for each other when the emperor was still a prince. Afterward, the Empress Dowager raised Qi Yuan. To protect him, she sent him to this temple before her death, far away from the struggles in the palace. I was 10 years old then, and Qi Yuan was 13. I returned to the temple and knelt with Qi Yuan before my mother, saying, "Mother, I do not wish to marry Shun Jinan." My mother did not speak, but looked at Qi Yuan and smiled, saying, "Third prince, please return for now. I have something to discuss with Tanga alone." After Qi Yuan left, my mother spoke indifferently. "You are already 13 years old, with only 2 years left until your marriage. It is time for you to return to the minister's residence to learn the proper etiquette." Before I could respond, my mother continued, "Tanga, I can see Qi Yuan's affection for you, but this is not something you should have now. The imperial decree has been issued, so let's not speak of it again. You know Qi Yuan's temperament, he will surely defy the decree with you." But we are no longer what we used to be. What do we have to rely on to resist? If you don't want him to end up like us, with no chance of rising in the world, set off tomorrow to return to the minister's residence. Spend a few years learning etiquette and how to be a proper mistress of the household. After saying this, my mother went back inside, watching the sun set behind the western hills. I suddenly understood what it meant to be powerless. I did not meet Qi Yuan to say goodbye. I wrote a letter and gave it to my mother to pass on to him. What my mother later said to Qi Yuan, I have no way of knowing. All I know is that from then on, I returned to the minister's residence. And he went back to the palace. Life back at the minister's residence was not easy. Madame Kui held sway there alone and would occasionally throw small obstacles in my way. The servants in the residence also judged people by their status and were not particularly courteous to me. The Kui family hired a governess to teach me etiquette, but they deliberately spread rumors outside that I was unruly and disrespectful to my elders. They hired teachers for me in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. But they publicly claimed that I had no talent and was difficult to teach. 2 years passed in this manner, and by then, the capital had already undergone a drastic change. It was said that the third prince, who had been raised outside the palace, suddenly returned 2 years ago and, in just 2 years, had become the Prince of Su, and decisive in killing, punishing treacherous officials without mercy. The Black Armor army he leads is so terrifying that they can raid and search homes without even needing the emperor's decree. Now he has become the living king of hell in the capital. As for another fascinating rumor, it concerns the 2 young ladies of the minister's residence. A legitimate daughter, Song Yuntang, was utterly unskilled in poetry, song, and literature. Possessing only a pretty face, she showed no respect for her elders, was foolish and ignorant, timid and unfit for any refined occasion, completely lacking in propriety. In contrast, her half-sister of the same age, Song Yunqing, was both talented and beautiful, with impeccable character, and was renowned throughout the capital. The 2 girls came of age in the same year, yet they were as different as heaven and earth. Although the distinction between legitimate and illegitimate children is a matter of fate, the effort made in later years should not be underestimated either. Who wouldn't say so? Whether born of the principal wife or a concubine, what does it matter? The one from the concubine is still far superior to the one from the principal wife. The words of the common folk were mostly ignored, but as the clamor grew louder, and seeing that the mistress of the minister's mansion, though not the principal wife, was treated as if she were, most of the nobility in the capital began to form their own judgments. It seems that the concubine-born daughter of the minister's mansion is to be held in higher esteem than the legitimate daughter. Over the course of 2 years, General Shun repeatedly achieved military successes, and the general's mansion grew increasingly illustrious. Meanwhile, General Shun's son, Shun Jinan, also achieved remarkable military feats while accompanying his father on the campaign, earning praise from the emperor as the future hope of the nation's battlefield. In such a stark contrast, everyone was eager to see how the Shun and Song families would handle the matter of the marriage arrangement. Everyone believed that the Shun family intended to break off the engagement. However, to everyone's surprise, on my coming-of-age ceremony, General Shun and his wife arrived at the minister's residence with Shun Jinan and the betrothal gifts. "Yuntang, you've grown so much, Mrs. Shun said with a smile as she greeted me. Mrs. Shun's words were warm and friendly, but for some reason, I sensed hostility in her eyes. Mrs. Shun, I said softly, bowing slightly. After 2 years of training, I was now capable of handling such social interactions. After the coming-of-age ceremony concluded, my father called me into his study. This was the first time he had summoned me alone since I returned to the estate 2 years ago. He sat at his desk and, upon seeing me enter, said, "Yuntang, the Shun family's intention is that since the year is almost over, We will begin preparing for your marriage to Jinan next spring, with the wedding date set for September of next year." I looked at my father, smiled gently, and said, "Yes, I am willing to follow your arrangements." My father looked at me and asked, "Today, General Shun and his family came. Did Shun Jinan speak to you alone?" I looked at my father's scrutinizing gaze and calmly replied, "No." Upon hearing this, my father immediately threw a cup of tea at my feet and scolded, "You know your own talents, and you're aware of the rumors outside. If you lose this marriage, what kind of family do you think you'll find? You must seize this opportunity and make Shun Jinan fall for you. I'm only thinking of your future." Looking at my father like this, I said, "Are you truly thinking of me? Or is it because the Shun family is now at the height of its power, and you want to use me to forge a connection with them?" Hearing this, he smiled and said, "Originally, you and your mother should have long been cast aside. It's only because the Shun family values the friendship with your grandfather that they insisted on marrying you. This is the only thing you can do for our Ministry of Rights now. It's good that you understand the interests involved, so you should think even more about how to smoothly enter the Shun family." He looked at me for a moment and then spoke again, "You've grown up now and look more and more like your mother. However, your mother was outstanding in talent, character, and appearance when she was young. Looking at it now, those years in the temple really held you back. The only thing you have going for you is this face." "But father, do you really think my mother and I learned nothing during those years in the temple?" Yet I didn't say it out loud. That night, when I returned to my room and saw the extra box on the table, my gaze froze for a moment, opened the box, and inside is a jade hairpin. This is the keepsake of Qi Yuan's mother. I recognize it. Back then, Qi Yuan said it was left to him by his mother, and from what the Empress Dowager implied, it was meant for his future wife. I take out the hairpin and fasten it in my hair, gazing at the moonlight outside the window. How I miss him. Qi Yuan, it's been 2 years since we last saw each other. Ever since my coming-of-age ceremony, the rumors in the streets have shifted to say that the legitimate daughter of the minister's mansion follows the young general from the general's mansion around every day, and that Shun Jinan doesn't like this legitimate daughter at all. After Song Yunqing, the daughter of the Minister of Personnel, came of age, suitors came one after another, but the minister's residents never agreed to any of them. I knew all of this was just talk spread by Lady Kui, with the aim of raising the status of her own daughter. Having heard this for so many years, I didn't want to pay it any mind. At this moment, the most important task was indeed to marry Shun Jinan. Only by marrying Shun Jinan could I resolve the predicament my mother and I were in, being controlled by the minister's residence. After the new year, the Ministry of Internal Affairs began to methodically prepare for my wedding, and as the Lantern Festival approached, the streets grew increasingly lively. During these days, I sent Shun Jinan the ginseng soup I made every day, but I only occasionally caught a glimpse of him. I could tell he was avoiding me, but Shun's wife, Lady Liu, would invite me to stay for tea and chat every day. Lady Liu always made excuses for Shun Jinan, saying that military affairs could not be neglected. After visiting many times, I could sense the subtle hints in Mrs. Liu's casual conversations with me, which essentially boiled down to her belief that I was not a good match for Shun Jinan. But since things had already come to this, she had accepted it. However, she believed I should work even harder. Although I couldn't compare to my sister, who was now the pearl of the capital, I still needed to be somewhat presentable. Every time I agreed and promised, I could always see the sigh in her eyes. Rumors also spread increasingly that I was deeply infatuated with Shun Jinan. On the day of the Lantern Festival, perhaps under the pressure from General Shun, Shun Jinan invited me to stroll the streets together. Knowing he wasn't willing, I stopped at a tea house and said to him, "Young General Shun, you may go ahead and enjoy yourself. I'm a bit tired and will have a cup of tea here. Let's meet back at this spot in an hour." Upon hearing this, Shun Jinan glanced at me, nodded as if in gratitude, and then disappeared into the crowd. I smiled as I watched his retreating figure. It seems he truly didn't want to spend another moment with me. The days ahead are likely to be even more difficult. I turned and entered the tea house, requested a private room, and sat alone drinking tea while listening to the opera. Suddenly, someone climbed in through the window and sat down across from me. It was Chi Yuan, TSK. Your fiancé ran off and left you behind. Chi Yuan didn't seem as cold and bloodthirsty in front of me as the rumors had made him out to be. If you came here to laugh at me, you can leave. Chi Yuan, I said in a low voice, looking into his eyes. Yun Tang, the gift I gave you on your coming-of-age day should have made my feelings clear. Would you be willing? Chi Yuan said, looking into my eyes. Third prince, I am already betrothed. Please don't say such things again. You should have understood my feelings when I left you behind all those years ago. I interrupted Chi Yuan before he could continue, turning my gaze away from him. Chi Yuan fell silent, and the atmosphere in the room instantly became so oppressive it was hard to breathe. We sat quietly for a while before he spoke. Miss Song, do not regret this. After saying that, he climbed out through the window again. I looked at the teacup Chi Yuan had drunk from and wiped away my tears. Although Chi Yuan is now the Prince of Su, the Empress's son, the second prince, is also determined to secure the position of Crown Prince. If he were to offend the Shen family because of me, Chi Yuan's situation would be unimaginable. An hour later, I went downstairs, intending to wait for Shen Jinan for a while, but unexpectedly, I saw him at a stall with my half-sister, guessing lantern riddles. I watched the two of them, so deeply in love, and wondered when they had gotten together. Perhaps my gaze was too intense, for Shen Jinan glanced my way and froze in place. My younger sister, Song Yunqing, also saw me. Seeing that neither of them made a move to approach me, I turned and went back to the tea house. In no time at all, Shen Jinan came up. I poured him a cup of tea, but he remained silent. I sipped my tea and gazed out the window, waiting for him to speak. After about a quarter of an hour, he slowly began. Song Yunta, I like Yunqing. I nodded and looked at him, smiling as I said, and then, General Shen. Perhaps he hadn't expected me to be so calm. Shen Jinan was momentarily at a loss for words. I had no choice but to speak up again. The engagement has already been settled, and I'm afraid even you, General Shen, cannot change it, since that is the case. I hope you understand what you are doing. Perhaps he didn't expect me to respond this way, which was quite different from the rumors. There wasn't a trace of foolishness or timidity in my demeanor. Everything is because I admire Yunqing. Yunqing is not at fault, so please do not seek revenge on her, Shen Jinan said to me. She is not at fault. Does she not know about our engagement? It takes two to tango, General Shen. Naturally, I won't seek revenge on her. A sister born of a concubine poses no threat to me. But things have come to this. The young general, full of vigor, continued, don't you dare threaten me with the arranged marriage. Even if your grandfather did a favor for my Shen family, I would never marry a woman as cunning and eloquent as you. I looked at Shen Jinan and smiled, saying, if you don't want me to expose the affair between the two of you, General Shen, you'd better obediently marry me. I don't think you want everyone to lose face. After saying these words, I glanced at him, stood up, and left the tea house to return home. Shen Jinan's face immediately darkened. Yes. He had achieved fame at a young age and was unruly. Hearing me speak of his beloved woman in such a way in front of him, he probably wished he could kill me on the spot. But I can see that in the Shen family, General Shen is the one in charge, and Shen Jinan wouldn't dare to defy his father. But this time, I miscalculated. The next day, I was painting a plum blossom picture in my room when my maid Pei Yu suddenly rushed in. Miss, that young general from the Shen family is. I frowned and interrupted her. Pei Yu, I've told you not to come in when I closed the door in my room. Pei Yu hurriedly replied, Miss, Shen Jinan has come to break off the engagement. When I followed Pei Yu to the front hall, General Shen and my father were seated in high positions, while Shen Jinan knelt on the ground, holding the marriage contract in his hands. I bowed to my father and General Shen but did not speak. General Shen looked at me and said, "Tanga, I am sorry for you. I have raised such an unfilial son, but rest assured, I will not let the engagement be annulled." When I arrived, Pei Yu had already told me that Shen Tunan had knelt at the entrance of the minister's residence, attracting many commoners, and only after the matter escalated did General Shen hurriedly come. "Uncle, may I ask why the young General Shen is so determined to break off the engagement?" I looked at Shen Jinan and spoke. "Yes, breaking off the engagement for no reason. And with my reputation as it is, the path ahead for me is likely a dead end." Perhaps not expecting me to ask, Shen Jinan replied, "Your reputation precedes you. I do not wish to marry a wife who is utterly useless." "Shut up, you unfilial son, Tanga." General Shen was so angry he wanted to come over and slap Shen Jinan, then looked at me. "Uncle Shen, I think young General Shen doesn't like me. I'm afraid my future days won't be easy either." I smiled gently. "Shen Jinan, you only considered breaking off the engagement, but have you considered me?" I turned to look at Shen Jinan and asked, "In today's society, a woman who is rejected is like a discarded wife, and with your current reason, how should I face the world in the future?" I admire General Shen's family. I believe young General Shen should also be an upright and honorable person. Why don't you tell the real reason for breaking off the engagement? My series of questions left Shen Jinan speechless. From what Tanga is saying, it seems there are hidden circumstances. General Shen spoke up. I looked at General Shen, knelt before him and my father, and said, "Your daughter is foolish, thinking that being good to young General Shen would lead to a harmonious marriage. But yesterday, I saw Shen Jinan and my second sister, Yun Qing, deeply affectionate. I believe this is the real reason young General Shen called off the engagement. They have ruined my reputation and left me with no way out. I cannot let them off easily. By bringing this matter to light, the world will only know that Shen Jinan repaid kindness with betrayal and broke his promise. As for the Shen family's illegitimate daughter, she is nothing more than a wicked woman who stole her own sister's fiancé. What pearl of the capital! She doesn't even deserve to have any face." Before General Shen could speak, my father slapped me across the face. "How dare you? Who allowed you to slander your sister and Jinan like this?" I looked at my father, and at that moment, I finally realized deeply that the position of my half-sister in my father's heart was something I could never match. Whether it's slander or not, General Shen is honorable and upright. Shouldn't he give Yunqing a proper status by now? I knelt on the ground, my gaze fixed directly on Shen Jinan. Before Shen Jinan could react, I turned to my father and General Shen and said, "General Shen's love for my second sister runs as deep as the sea. Why not let this pair of lovers be together?" General Shen immediately stepped forward to help me up and said, "Tanga, it's my unfilial son who has wronged you. I have already lost face. But rest assured, I will give you an explanation." I did not speak, watching Shen Jinan as he said, "Let's settle this matter quickly. However, your previous reason cannot stand. It was you who had feelings for my second sister and betrayed me first. Do not try to shift the blame onto me. Let's finalize this matter as soon as possible to avoid further complications." Shen Jinan knelt before General Shen and said, "Father, Yunqing and I are deeply in love. I beg you to allow me to marry the second daughter of the Song family." Upon hearing this, my father immediately pulled General Shen aside and said, "My daughter Yunqing's reputation and beauty are unmatched throughout the entire capital. Jinan and my daughter are a perfect match in talent and appearance. How about?" General Shen replied, "Since things have come to this, forcing my son and Tanga into a marriage would only bring unhappiness to both of them. Let us each preserve our dignity. As for the rest, Minister Song, You will have to clean up this mess yourself." Then, with a glance at his son kneeling on the ground, he turned and left in a huff, but I knew that General Shun had tacitly consented. Indeed, my status as a benefactor's descendant could never compare to his own flesh and blood. Even though I knew Shen Jinan had wronged me, I still had to preserve his dignity. By noon, the rumor had spread throughout the city that I had been rejected for marriage due to my foolishness, and that Shen Jinan had publicly knelt in my home to propose to my half-sister, Song Yunqing. In order to maintain harmony between the Song and Shen families, for a moment, I became the laughingstock of the entire capital. That evening, my father called me into his study once again. Seeing me enter, my father began, "Yuntang, I have a few words to say to you." I looked at my father and replied, "Please speak, father." My father spoke in a low voice, "Given the circumstances, there is no longer any possibility between you and Jinan. It is your own lack of ability that failed to win Shen Jinan's heart. Our marriage alliance with the Shen family must proceed. Tomorrow, I will go to the Imperial Palace with General Shun to arrange your sister's marriage to Shen Jinan." I looked at my father and said, "If that is the case, then it is for the best, since there is no fault on my part." "Father," before I could finish speaking, my father interrupted me, saying, "Our alliance with the Shen family must indeed be secured. But it should be done with dignity and without complications. Given the situation, do not blame me for speaking harshly. You are no longer of any use to the Ministry of Personnel. A woman who has been rejected in marriage will find it difficult to secure a good match." I remained silent as my father continued, "I have discussed this with your Aunt Kui. We will claim that you fell ill recently and suddenly became mentally impaired. To facilitate the marriage alliance between the Shun and Song families, your sister will be married off instead. This will not only preserve your sister's reputation but also give the Shun family a way out, while completely safeguarding the reputations of both the Ministry of Personnel and the General's residence. In a few days, I will send you back to your mother." I chuckled softly. "When you were making all these calculations, father, did you ever consider me? It's already hard enough being a woman, let alone in the current situation. You know very well how the Kui family has treated me these past 2 years, and you're aware of the rumors outside. We're both your daughters. Are you really going to throw me into the fire like this, perhaps no longer wanting to pretend?" My father spoke up angrily, "You and your mother have long lost your value. I've kept you both alive and given you a comfortable life. What more do you want? This matter is settled. You'd better not do anything foolish, or don't blame me for showing no mercy as a father." I looked at my father before me and sneered, "Do you really think you'll let me walk out of the minister's residence alive and return to my mother's side?" Perhaps because I had hit a nerve, he was left speechless. Indeed, given the circumstances, my continued existence would be like a ticking time bomb, ready to ruin Song Yunqing's reputation at any moment. He had me escorted back to my room, placed under strict surveillance, and forbidden from leaving. Once back in my room, I carefully considered how to proceed from here. I am not foolish. Even before returning to the minister's residence, my mother had already laid out the worst possible outcomes for me. I cannot afford to be discouraged or slack off, or else I would be seeking my own death. Once labeled with a foolish and insane condition, if I stay in the minister's residence, I fear I won't survive until spring. A stepmother who wants my life at any moment, a cold-blooded father, there truly seems to be no hope in sight. I cannot die. Late at night, I slipped out of the minister's residence. While climbing the wall of the Prince Su's mansion, I was still thinking that the guards here were too lax. Anyone could easily assassinate Qi Yuan. It wasn't until I made my way through and saw the study still lit that I thought, Qi Yuan is really diligent, isn't he? Just as I was wondering how to push the door open, a voice came from inside. "Come in, you've been sneaking around all this way." Only then did I realize that from the moment I touched the wall of the Prince Su's mansion, Qi Yuan had probably already known I was coming. I carefully opened the door and saw Qi Yuan dressed in white, crafting a peachwood comb. I walked toward him and stood across from his desk without saying a word. He glanced at me and asked, "How did you sneak out, with the minister's mansion so lively today?" "It couldn't have been easy for you," I smiled and replied. "Perhaps I acted too obediently in the past 2 years. None of the guards thought I'd be bold enough to slip away, so they kept a loose watch on me. Slipping out was simple. Sit." He pointed to the spot beside him, signaling for me to come over. We used to sit like this beside each other without any barriers. But now, I followed his words and sat down. He didn't even glance at me, just kept fiddling with his peachwood comb. The comb was already taking shape, it just needed some polishing to be usable. Qi Yuan didn't say a word, but I suddenly felt that our recent actions and conversation were no different from 2 years ago. Thinking of the purpose of my visit, and seeing that Qi Yuan had no intention of speaking first, I had no choice but to muster the courage and say, "Qi Yuan, would you be willing to marry me?" As soon as I said this, Qi Yuan put down the comb in his hand, turned to look at me, and said with a smile, "TSK, I remember being rejected just a few days ago." I had no choice but to tug at his sleeve and, without realizing it, said in a coquettish tone, "Then, Qi Yuan, are you still willing to marry me?" He responded with a flood of kisses, and after a while, he released me and said, "Look at what's in front of you." I opened the memorial in front of me. It was a petition he had submitted to the emperor, requesting permission for our marriage. I looked at Qi Yuan, and he gazed back at me, saying, "Tanga, no matter whether you came tonight or not, I would have pulled you out of this quagmire. I'm just glad you came." Yes, I came. It wasn't him forcing me, it was him confirming that I also had feelings for him in my heart. He escorted me back to my room in the Ministry of Personnel's residence and waited until I fell asleep before slipping out through the window. When I woke up the next day, everything in the residence seemed as if nothing had happened. The wedding preparations continued, only now the bride had become Song Yunqing, and the servant's attitude toward me grew increasingly unwelcoming. Pei Yu looked at the food on my table, her eyes reddening. "Miss, why don't we go back to Body Temple? They really look down on us too much. Indeed, the food on my table is probably even worse than what the palace maids in the mansion get." I patiently comforted Pei Yu. "Believe me, we will definitely get better. Pei Yu." I spent the morning painting plum blossoms in my room. Around noon, my father called me to the main hall. Looking at me, Song Yunqing smiled and said, "Sorry, sister, that fine husband of yours might have to be called brother-in-law from now on." "Oh, I almost forgot, you probably won't have the fortune to see us get married." I looked at the smug Song Yunqing before me and said with a smile, "A concubine-born daughter who knowingly pursues a man already betrothed. If she had any sense of shame, she wouldn't dare act so boldly in front of me." My father slapped me across the face and said, "Who allowed you to speak to your sister like that? You useless." My father was about to slap me again when a guard suddenly interrupted the commotion in the room. "Sir, Eunuch Su has arrived." Everyone present stood respectfully waiting upon seeing the newcomer. Indeed, who would dare to be disrespectful to the emperor's personal eunuch, unexpectedly? This time Eunuch Su brought 2 imperial edicts. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor decrees, General Shen Jinan, in recognition of his past military achievements, requests to marry Song Yunqing, the daughter of the Minister of Personnel. The emperor, moved by his military merits and respecting his affection, specially grants permission to annul the marriage between Shen Jinan and Song Yuntang. So it is decreed. The disdainful gazes of the crowd swept over my body. My father was stunned for a moment, wondering why the explanation differed from the one he and General Shun had presented to the emperor that morning, that Yuntang was mentally impaired and thus the marriage was to be changed. Now, This imperial edict undeniably confirmed that Shen Jinan and Song Yunqing had been entangled with her own brother-in-law while Shen Jinan was still engaged, rather than me being mentally impaired due to illness. What's the matter, Minister? Hurry and accept the decree with gratitude. Eunuch Su reminded. Yes, Eunuch Su. Just as my father was about to rise, Eunuch Su added, Minister Song, hold on, look at this old servant's memory, there's a second decree yet to be announced. The crowd continued to kneel in silence, all curious about what other imperial edicts might follow. By the decree of heaven and the mandate of the emperor, it is hereby proclaimed that Song Yunta of the Ministry of Personnel, possessing both virtue and talent, gentle and courteous, beautiful in appearance and wise in mind, and as the orphan of General Lin, is hereby betrothed to the Prince of Su. The wedding is set for the 17th day of the 7th month, so it is decreed. Everyone in the mansion was as still as a virgin. How could Song Yunta be betrothed to the Prince of Su? How was this possible? Seeing that no one spoke, Eunuch Su smiled and said, now that both imperial edicts have been read, Minister Song is truly blessed. Both of your daughters have secured such excellent husbands, and your future is bound to be even more promising. My father and the others rose to their feet, took the imperial edict, and flattered with a smile. Thank you for your kind words, Eunuch Su. I saw Eunuch Su walk straight toward me, take out a jewelry box from his sleeve, and say with a smile, Miss Song, this is what Prince Su ordered me to deliver to you. He said to treat it as a trinket for you to keep. I took the box and said, thank you, Eunuch. Eunuch Su bowed to my father and me and said, I have delivered the imperial decree, so I shall take my leave now. Seeing Eunuch Su completely disappear outside the mansion, my father looked at me with a frown and said, what is your relationship with Prince Su? You know full well that our Ministry of Personnel has aligned itself with the second prince. Now that Prince Su is seeking to marry you, are you deliberately trying to bring ruin upon our family? Upon hearing this, my half-sister Song Yunqing shouted at me angrily, what right do you have to marry Prince Su? Song Yuntang, what right? Yes, if I were to marry Qi Yuan, the entire family would have to bow to me. Song Yunqing had thought that after marrying Shen Jinan, she would be the talk of the town in the capital. But she never expected to still be overshadowed by me. How could she possibly be content with that? On what grounds? On the grounds that I am the legitimate daughter of the minister's household. No matter how outstanding you are still just a concubine-born daughter. Even if you enter the Prince Su's residence, you will only be a concubine. Sister, just behave yourself, my dear sister. I looked at the furious Song Yunqing and said, upon hearing this, my father made a move to strike me. I stopped his hand and said with a smile, Father, now that the imperial decree has been issued, if you truly care about your career, you shouldn't waste time with me here. Instead, you should think carefully about which side to take. The news that Prince Su had petitioned to marry Song Yuntang, the legitimate daughter of the minister's household, left the onlookers utterly stunned. No one expected that the daughter of the minister's household, who was still being treated as a joke just yesterday, would now become the princess consort of Su, and not just any consort, but the principal one, personally sought after by Prince Su himself. It is unclear whether someone deliberately steered public opinion toward Song Yunqing and Shen Jinan. But some have already begun to clamor that the Song family's legitimate daughter was never truly foolish, and that Shen Jinan and Song Yunqing, disregarding their betrothal, have long been entangled, causing both their reputations to plummet. For a time, the debate raged on. A legitimate daughter is, after all, a legitimate daughter, embodying the grace of a noble family, while a concubine-born daughter remains just that, ultimately unfit for the grand stage. I know that Qi Yuan had a hand in this behind the scenes. I returned to my room and opened the jewelry box that Qi Yuan had entrusted to Eunuch Su to deliver. Inside was a peachwood comb, the very one he had meticulously polished last night. I couldn't help but smile and placed it on the dressing table. Mother, what should we do now? The rumors outside are painting me in such a terrible light. I worked so hard to take her engagement, but now she's stealing all the attention. Song Yunqing complained in Lady Kui's room. Rumors among the common folk are just idle talk. You shouldn't pay them too much mind. Although General Shen's residence may not compare to the prince's mansion, the prince's mansion is still a royal household. How could it possibly have only one woman? All you need to do is firmly capture Shen Jinan's heart. A husband's favor is what truly gives a woman her standing in the future, Lady Kui advised while pouring tea for Song Yunqing. Lady Kui then said, in 10 days, it will be the flower viewing banquet hosted by the Empress. Every year, the flower viewing banquet invites the female relatives of powerful officials in the capital. You excel in poetry, song, music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, if you perform well that day. While Song Yuntang is just a girl who knows nothing, public opinion can be reversed. There's no need to rush. Song Yunqing thought about it and agreed. A woman with no talents would surely be humiliated. She smiled and said, yes, mother. 3 days later, Miss, today is the flower viewing banquet. Since you have just been engaged to Prince Su, the women in the capital are likely to give you a hard time. Pei Yu reminded me as she styled my hair. Indeed, many in the capital wished to enter Prince Su's residence. Before, Qi Yuan was unmarried, and no one dared to provoke this formidable prince or inquire about him. Now that I have entered Prince Su's residence, I fear many will try to force their way in later. Of course, it's mostly out of envy for me. I understand, Pei Yu, but in the past, others were the knife and I was the fish. Today, it's time for things to change. I looked at myself in the mirror. I am very beautiful. But my former reputation for foolishness and the Kui family's deliberate efforts to hide me had overshadowed it. I looked at the jewelry on the table. Took out the jade hairpin Qi Yuan gave me on my coming-of-age ceremony, and handed it to Pei Yu. Use this hairpin. The Empress's flower viewing banquet was naturally grand, and everyone's attire was dazzling and competitive. Wearing just a jade hairpin made me stand out a bit. Miss Song has just been betrothed, yet she dresses so plainly. Does she not value the Empress Dowager's flower viewing banquet at all? The first to speak was Lin Qingqian. The legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's household, she and Song Yunqing have always been on good terms, and now that she knows of her situation, she is determined to stand up for her. Moreover, she has long harbored feelings for Qi Yuan. After I was betrothed to Qi Yuan by imperial decree, she even begged the Prime Minister to speak to the Emperor about marrying Qi Yuan as a concubine. The Prime Minister is still weighing the prospects of the second prince and Qi Yuan, so naturally, he would not act as rashly as Lin Qingqian. A wise bird chooses its tree to perch on, a principle the Prime Minister understands better than anyone. My father certainly understands this better than anyone. Yet he also fears choosing the wrong master. That's why he chose to ally with the most prestigious Shen family. However, on the surface, he now appears to have submitted to the second prince. My sudden interference has disrupted his plans, with such a stunning appearance. Sister Lin must be taking this flower viewing banquet very seriously. In that case, perhaps you should focus less on things that don't deserve your attention. I teased with a smile. You, Lin Qingqian flushed with anger. As soon as these words were spoken, the crowd whispered, isn't Song Yuntang supposed to be a weak and useless person? Seeing her today, she doesn't seem quite like the rumors say. Perhaps she's gained confidence because she's about to marry Prince Su. Your consort is truly not like the rumors say, the Emperor said, sitting on a stool and looking at Qi Yuan. That hairpin of hers looks somewhat familiar. Yuana, Qi Yuan and the Emperor watched everything from behind the screen. The Emperor had come today specifically to see the woman his beloved son wanted to marry. What kind of woman could make Qi Yuan go to such lengths? Father, I am deeply in love with her. After a while, The empress arrived at the banquet with the imperial consorts. After everyone paid their respects, the empress spoke. "The weather has warmed today, and I have invited you all to enjoy the flowers. Please make yourselves at ease." Everyone responded in unison. "Yes." The empress glanced around the room and, turning toward me, asked, "Is Song Yuntang from the Ministry of Personnel present?" I immediately stood up and replied, "Greetings, Your Majesty." The Queen smiled gently. "I see Tanga is truly beautiful. We will be family from now on. So there's no need to be so formal." I looked at the Queen and replied with a smile, "Thank you, Your Majesty. However, the proper etiquette should still be observed. Tanga is modest and well-mannered. Yuana has truly found a good princess consort. I only hope my Anna can be as fortunate. Please, have a seat." After the Queen finished speaking, I silently pondered her words. They sounded pleasant, but considering my reputation outside, she was likely subtly mocking Qi Yuan for choosing someone like me, a useless person. I thought it would end there, but the person next to her smiled and said, "Your Majesty, the ceremony hasn't been performed yet. Whether we are truly one family remains to be seen." I took a closer look and recognized her as the virtuous consort, Lin Qingqian's own aunt. The empress did not respond, but Lin Qingqian spoke up, "Your Majesty, the weather is lovely today, and Sister Yunqing's dancing is exquisite. Why not let Sister Yunqing perform a dance?" The empress replied, "That is a splendid idea. After admiring the flowers for so long, one can't help but feel weary. I've heard that Yunqing's dancing skills are unmatched, even by the most famous dancers in the palace. Yunqing, what do you think?" Song Yunqing stood up and said, "Thank you for your high regard, Your Majesty. Then I shall humbly present my performance." Song Yunqing indeed had some real skill, and everyone watched with rapt attention. After the dance was completed, the empress smiled and said, "Truly worthy of being the pearl of the capital. Such a dance is truly marvelous. The Shun family has indeed found such a fine daughter-in-law. A reward." Song Yunqing bowed and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Then she continued, "Your Majesty, I have an impertinent request." The empress looked at her and said, "Speak." Song Yunqing glanced at me, and I immediately felt uneasy. I only heard her continue, "My elder sister has been away for many years and has returned to the estate for over 2 years now. Her reputation outside is not very good. I would like to give her a chance to prove herself, so that she can marry into the Prince Su's household without being criticized." I looked at Song Yunqing and thought to myself, what a clever scheme, speaking to this extent. If I refuse, it would spoil the empress's mood and only confirm my reputation as a useless person. But if I agree and fail, wouldn't that be even more embarrassing? Just as everyone was waiting to see me make a fool of myself, I stood up and bowed to the empress, saying, "My sister has shown such consideration for me, and I am truly honored. I humbly ask Her Majesty to grant me an opportunity." The empress replied, "Tanga, there's no need to be so formal. This is, after all, a flower viewing banquet, so it's all fine. What would you like to perform?" "Tanga, I wish to play a tune of longing," I said with a smile, looking at the empress. "Very well, bring me that instrument of thought." Suddenly, the emperor's voice came through. Everyone rose to pay their respects. "We greet Your Majesty, rise," said the emperor. "I hope I haven't disturbed everyone's enjoyment," the emperor said with a smile as he took the main seat. "Your Majesty is too kind." "But the idea was noble consort Yi's." The empress paused. "I have repaired the idea. After Wana left, no one has played this zither for a long time," the emperor said with a smile. "Yes." The empress said no more. The emperor looked at me affectionately and said, "Young lady of the Song family, you must play well." "Thank you, Your Majesty," I replied with a bow. "I do know how to play the qin. My mother was renowned throughout the capital, and during the years we spent at the temple, she did not neglect my education. On the contrary, my skill with the qin is considered among the finest of my talents." Amidst the disdainful gazes of the crowd, I began to play. They were surprised that I could play the qin at all, and even more astonished that I played so well. Song Yunqing clenched her fingers, looking at me with a face full of resentment. As the song ended, the emperor was the first to applaud. Excellent, truly excellent. This is the most beautiful sound of the zither I have heard in recent years. I stood up and curtsied. Thank you for your undeserved praise, Your Majesty. It is the emperor's zither that is exceptional. The emperor nodded and continued, seeing you today, it is clear that the rumors are untrue. The eldest daughter of the Song family is truly both talented and beautiful. Thank you, Your Majesty. From now on, you should call me father, the emperor said to me with a smile. Before I could speak, the emperor continued, this sword of will is now yours. It is its fortune to meet its master. I knelt down and said, your subject daughter thanks Your Majesty for your great kindness. Rise. I stood up and returned to my seat. Song Yunqing glared at me resentfully, saying, are you mocking me? Song Yuntang. I smiled at her and replied, I never said I couldn't do the music, chess, calligraphy, and painting you mentioned. In fact, I should thank you for giving me this opportunity. After a while, the emperor left, and the empress instructed everyone to enjoy themselves before departing as well. After the queen left, everyone began to chatter, with the topic of discussion naturally centered on me. I simply sat in my seat, sipping tea, wishing for time to pass as quickly as possible. The news of my performance on the qin, which had stirred the capital, quickly spread throughout the city. When it was all over, Shun Jinan waited for Song Yunqing at the palace gate. Everyone looked at each other, with occasional glances falling on me. Jinan, what brings you here? Song Yunqing ran toward him with a smile. I came to pick you up, of course. Shun Jinan had already heard the news that I could play the qin, and his eyes glanced in my direction, but I didn't look at him, just kept walking forward. TSK. So what if she's shed her reputation as a fool? A woman like her still needs a husband who dotes on her completely to be considered fortunate. Lin Qingqian spoke with a smile, but her gaze was fixed on me. I looked straight at her and said, can a woman only survive by relying on a man? Does your dignity come solely from whether your husband loves you or not? She was momentarily speechless, but still argued stubbornly, you're just a discarded woman who was rejected in marriage. Do you think Prince Su would ever fancy you? In just a few days, he'll have a new favorite, and you'll be nothing but a cast-off wife. Oh, it seems you understand my thoughts better than I do myself. It was Qi Yuan's voice. Greetings to Prince Su. Everyone bowed in unison. Rise. His gaze remained fixed on me as he spoke. Prince Su, I. Lin Qingqian was momentarily flustered by Qi Yuan's sudden appearance. This was the first time I had seen him since that day I went to find him. He looked at the hairpin in my hair, smiled, walked over to me, and took my hand. He spoke coldly. Since everyone is here today, let me reiterate once more. I am the one who sought to marry Yunta. I am fond of her, and moreover, the Su manor only needs one princess consort. I have no intention of taking concubines, no matter who it is. Put away any inappropriate thoughts. If Yunta becomes unhappy and it affects your own family, don't blame me for not warning you. Yes, everyone replied with fearful expressions. Indeed. If it were someone else, it might be taken as a joke, but when Qi Yuan spoke of implicating an entire family, it was because he truly had the power to do so. Let's go. I'll escort you back, Qi Yuan said to me with a smile. He did not refer to himself as this king, but used I, leaving everyone present stunned. The tone he uses when speaking to me now makes it hard to believe he is the same person who just threatened everyone. I obediently nodded and said, okay. Everyone watched as the two of us left. Those who had just looked at Song Yunqing with envy were now completely absorbed in Qi Yuan's attention toward me. We traveled in silence for a long while before I finally asked, Qi Yuan, what about this hairpin? This was left by my mother for her future daughter-in-law. Qi Yuan said, lying down on my lap. But back then. Tanga, I will only marry you. I had nothing to say. It turned out he had been scheming since my coming-of-age ceremony. I want to go back to Body Temple for a visit, I said, stroking Chi Yuan's hair. Alright, let's go tomorrow. It's time to report back to mother, Chi Yuan said with his eyes closed. I didn't ask in detail what he meant by reporting back, as I had a vague sense of it. The next day, Chi Yuan came to pick me up, and we went to the Body Temple. Who would have thought that my mother was already waiting at the door, as if she had known we would come? Mother, I cried, throwing myself into her arms and unable to hold back my tears. In the 2 years since returning to the Ministry of Personnel, I had hidden my true nature and hadn't shown such a childish side in a long time. You're about to get married, yet you're still so childish. Aren't you afraid Yuana will laugh at you? My mother smiled and patted my head. Mother, don't worry. Even after we're married, I'll make sure Tanga stays this childish forever. Chi Yuan teased us with a smile. My mother chuckled and said, come on in. After we entered the room, Chi Yuan and I sat across from my mother. My mother slowly began, over the past 2 years. This daughter of mine hasn't been as diligent as Yuana, visiting at least once a month. Alright, I won't tease you two anymore. I suppose you two haven't seen each other in these 2 years either. Now that you've finally come together, I can rest assured, Yuana, I entrust my daughter to you from now on. Chi Yuan responded, I will. After chatting with my mother and having lunch, Chi Yuan and I went to the place where we first learned about the arranged marriage. I skipped a stone across the water. I recalled my mother's words earlier. After you left, I didn't give him the letters you wrote, but I told him to think of his helpless self whenever he faced difficulties. He returned to the palace after that. In a place like the palace, reaching his current status in just 2 years must have meant enduring a great deal of hardship. I used to think men were unreliable, but Tanga, if it's Chi Yuan, I truly believe he loves you. Chi Yuan noticed I was deep in thought and pinched my cheek, saying, what's wrong, Song Yun Tang? You seem preoccupied, I said in his arms. Let's get married quickly. Chi Yuan, he touched my hair and said with a smile. So eager to marry me, huh? I didn't say anything, just leaned into his embrace, watching the sunset, and sighed at how beautiful the evening glow was. The sun always rises in the east and sets in the west, but I know our love will never fade. After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. I had already written the divorce letter long ago. I just kept it in mind and didn't write a title. I was just waiting for the right opportunity to trick him into signing it. And now, the opportunity has come. Ji Beixiao's mistress is pregnant, but the woman left a message and ran away. Ji Beixiao was overjoyed but also anxious. Immediately gathering his men to prepare for the pursuit, before leaving, he didn't forget to make things difficult for me. Upon my return, I intend to take Yua as my concubine. Oh, okay. I nodded obediently. Miss Yu has no dowry, so I plan to give her a piece of land and a house I own. I just need you to sign the papers. With that, I handed him the document I had been carrying close to my heart every day. He actually seemed a bit delighted. Qingyang, I knew it, you are the most virtuous. As he spoke, he signed his name. Since you have no objections to me taking her in, then let's proceed with the arrangements. With that, he turned and left. I unfolded the document in my hand. Unable to suppress a smile, Xiao Dao watched as Ji Beixiao disappeared without a trace in mere moments, stomping her feet in frustration. That Shun Yu is nothing but a seductive fox spirit. She left, but deliberately left a message to make the Marquis chase after her. I shook my head and smiled, then put away the divorce agreement. But men love this kind of thing. It's called playing hard to get. Alright, Xiao Dao, go and find my dowry list for me. On the other side, Nanian seemed to have just come to her senses. Miss, the Marquis, he signed it just like that. I nodded. she muttered angrily. He really was in such a hurry that he didn't even look at it. I let out a scornful laugh. Exactly. That's why I took advantage of his urgency to make him leave. Such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. How could I miss it? But miss, even though the document is signed, what should we do next? Looking at Nanian's worried expression, I began to think things through. My mother passed away early, and my father accidentally killed himself by crashing into a pillar while protecting the emperor. The concubines in the household either ran off with the servants and guards or simply scattered. Only the nanny and personal maid left to me by my mother remained. In recognition of my father's loyalty, the emperor betrothed me to Ji Baixiao, the youngest marquis of Yong'an in the court. Even on my wedding day, the empress bestowed many dowry gifts upon me as additional blessings. Thus, I can say I was married in a grand and glorious manner. However, I never expected that not long after I married Ji Baixiao, I would learn that he had long been keeping a mistress named Shen Yu. From then on, I became much more perfunctory towards Ji Baixiao, and he probably found me uninteresting, growing increasingly cold towards me as well. It was only because this marriage was bestowed by the emperor that he dared not let things become too strained between us. Moreover, I am indeed a capable housekeeper, managing all matters both inside and outside the estate with great efficiency and order. With such a capable wife like me, that man naturally becomes even more reluctant to let go easily. I had Xiaodao follow the list and take out all the dowry my mother left for me, moving it to the storeroom and locking it up first. As for the dowry bestowed by the empress, I have already used it to open several shops, all of which are highly profitable ventures. But there are people from Ji Baixiao in the shop, so I naturally have to replace them. It just takes some time to replace people, and during this period, I need to think about what to do next. After all, my marriage was granted by the emperor, so the divorce document also needs the emperor's seal and approval. Moreover, although women in this dynasty can establish their own households, so far, no woman has ever left her family and set up her own household. After all, in today's patriarchal society, it is extremely difficult for women to be self-reliant. I have a bit of a headache. I'm afraid I'll have to go to the palace in the next few days to deal with the empress. On the evening of the second day, the housekeeper came running to me, saying that Ji Baixiao had sent a letter back. The letter said that he had found Shen Yu and was preparing to return to the capital. However, Shen Yu was suffering from severe morning sickness, and he feared the journey would be too bumpy for her, so the trip would be slowed down. He also asked me to carefully arrange Shen Yu's courtyard and even entrusted me with handling her dowry. I sneered, calmly handed the letter to the butler, and told him to make the preparations, and I have more important things to do. A few days later, I entered the palace. The current empress and the emperor were childhood sweethearts, deeply in love for 7 years, but the appearance of consort Zhong drove a wedge between them. She tried to break free from this love triangle, requesting to leave the palace for spiritual cultivation, but the emperor forcibly confined her in the palace of eternal joy. When the queen was deeply favored by the emperor, she once showed me a bit of favor. When I went to see her, she was dressed in a plain green robe, kneeling before the Buddha, chanting sutras and praying for blessings. Since I have been secluded here, not a single person has sent a visiting card. It is truly difficult for you to still remember that I exist. However, one does not visit the temple without a reason. I suspect you have something to ask of me. I chuckled softly. Your Majesty the Queen is indeed a remarkable person, with such a clever mind. It is a pity to be locked away in a place like this, akin to the cold palace, is it not? She turned to look at me, her eyes filled with indifference. You don't need to flatter me like this. If I were truly clever and perceptive, why would I need to chant sutras and worship Buddha here in the Palace of Eternal Joy? Looking at the deep-seated obsession of the Empress, I couldn't help but sigh. Your Majesty, in your position, you should fulfill your duties. After all, you are the Empress. Don't you want to regain the Emperor's favor? A flicker of disbelief flashed in the Empress's eyes. Regain the Emperor's favor? She staggered over to the portrait of her and the Emperor, reaching out to touch the face of the young man. I no longer wish to have his love. My young man is already dead. If I had any hesitation before coming here, hearing these words made up my mind. I placed the brocade pouch on the table. Your Majesty may not care about the Emperor. But what about the Crown Prince? Does your Majesty not care for him either? At the mention of the Crown Prince, tears welled up and streamed down the Empress's face. I pushed the pouch toward her. Here is a method to help your Highness. Whether to proceed or not is entirely up to you. As for the favor I am asking of you, it is also written inside. With that, I quietly withdrew from the Palace of Eternal Joy. Once outside the palace, I let out a long sigh of relief. Before I came here, my job was in traditional Chinese medicine beauty care, and in my spare time, I also studied various fragrances. What I gave the Empress was not only a beauty-preserving formula but also a special fragrance that could enhance the pleasure of intimate relations. However, this fragrance was not meant to be burned as incense. Rather, it could naturally emanate from the human body, as long as the Empress put her heart into it, with her already beautiful foundation. She would surely regain the Emperor's favor within 2 months. A little over a month later, Ji Baixiao finally returned to the capital with Shen Yu. The so-called fear of her bumpy ride and the slow progress of the journey were indeed quite slow. However, this suited me just fine. Now, the shop had been handed over to new management, and my newly rented residence was almost ready. Most importantly, the news that the Empress had left the Palace of Eternal Joy and reconciled with the Emperor had recently spread throughout the streets and alleys. I think what I seek should be achieved in no time. Miss, the Marquis has returned. I was lying on the recliner, cracking melon seeds, when Xiao Dao hurriedly ran into the courtyard from outside. Nanian rushed forward in 2 quick steps and gave Xiao Dao a slap on the head. I've told you to watch your words and actions. What's with all this shouting and making a scene? Xiao Dao rubbed her head, feeling wronged. No, the Marquis didn't return alone. He brought that vixen Shen Yu directly into the mansion. She hasn't even been formally taken in yet, and is planning to let her live here like this. I nodded and hummed in agreement. This was exactly as expected. After finally finding his beloved again, and with her being pregnant, how could Ji Baixiao possibly let her live alone? Auntie Anne glanced back at me with concern, so I set down the sunflower seeds in my hand and stood up. Let's go. Check out the commotion at the entrance. When we arrived at the door, we saw Ji Baixiao carefully helping a woman dismount from her horse. This was my first time meeting Shen Yu. She appeared delicate, shy, and timid, with a blush on her cheeks. Her appearance was quite charming, but in my opinion, it was nothing extraordinary. Qingyang, seeing me. A flicker of amusement flashed in Ji Baixiao's eyes. He said, about to come over. Shen Yu leaned to the side. Marquis. Ji Baixiao hurriedly supported her. I watched them with amusement as they were lost in their own world, completely oblivious to others, and did not interrupt. I turned and went to the front hall. Madam, have you prepared everything I mentioned in the letter? I hope to welcome Yua into the household as soon as possible. I nodded with a smile. Rest assured, Marquis. Everything is in order. Ji Baixiao's face visibly relaxed, showing a look of joy. Suddenly, Shen Yu asked Ji Baixiao to help her up, as she wanted to offer me tea. I did not stop her. The hot tea was brought, and Shen Yu held it up. Sister, please. Before the words were finished, the teacup fell to the ground. I skillfully avoided the scalding tea, but still inevitably got my skirt wet. Ah, Marquis, this tea is so hot. It's not my sister's fault. I didn't hold it steady. What should we do now? Shen Yu cried and hid in Ji Baixiao's arms. Ji Baixiao was filled with pity and affection, casting a cold glance in my direction. Didn't you already agree to let me take Yua as a concubine? Why are you still making things difficult now? I twitched the corner of my mouth speechlessly. What did I do? I didn't even lift a hand. Ji Baixiao seemed to realize he had overreacted and looked a bit embarrassed. I got up, too lazy to bother with them any longer, and headed straight back to my own courtyard. Back in the courtyard, I had just collapsed into the recliner when Xiao Dao, her eyes red, launched into a tirade. What is the Marquis doing? As soon as he returns, he treats the young lady like this. And now he brings back a pregnant woman. He truly shows no regard for the young lady's dignity at all. Xiao Dao still sees me as the wife of the Marquis's household. She probably forgot that Ji Baixiao had already signed that divorce agreement. Auntie Anne also sighed beside me. Miss, although you can leave the Marquis's estate at any time now, the days ahead, she didn't continue, as it is indeed a difficult thing for a woman to go out and establish her own household. As soon as her words fell, a figure suddenly darted into my arms. Auntie Anne was instantly exasperated at his lack of ambition. Can't you be more careful in broad daylight? As she pulled Xiao Dao away, she muttered under her breath, cursing him for his seductive appearance. I looked at the man in my arms. Indeed, his face was seductive enough. In my spare time, I enjoy wandering around. Besides paying respects to the god of wealth, I sometimes visit the Jade Immortal Pavilion to tease the young attendants. Lin Shutang was someone I took a liking to at the Jade Immortal Pavilion. At the time, he was being ordered around by others. It was truly a pity for such a handsome face, so I spent a fortune to buy him and rented a house for him to live in. During the more than a month that Ji Baixiao was away, I simply brought him to live at the Marquis's residence. If Ji Baixiao kept Shinyu outside, could Lin Shutang be considered my kept lover? Thinking this way, I suddenly felt much more balanced. The only difference is that I keep Lin Shutang around just for the sake of eye candy. So far, the most intimate thing we've done is just hugging and holding each other like this. To be honest, I've always had my doubts about Lin Shutang's identity. After all, the servants in the mansion often report that he goes out every now and then, disappearing for 2 or 3 days before returning, so Auntie Anne always tells me to be careful around him. A swindler is nothing more than someone who deceives for lust or money, and I'm already married, far from being a young maiden. So being deceived for my looks shouldn't be a concern. Then I must be careful not to be swindled out of my money. After all, I am a true blue miser. Lin Shutang looked up at me. Even the mole under her eye seemed vivid and lifelike. Sister, when exactly will you be able to leave the Marquis's estate? I wish I could hurry too, but it all depends on Her Majesty the Empress's decision. I sighed softly. The feeling of having one's fate held in someone else's hands is truly unpleasant. But there's no other way after all. This is a patriarchal society. Sister, don't look so worried. With me here, once you leave the Marquis's estate, I will treat you well. In my heart, there is only you. His fair skin and delicate features made his pitiful expression seem natural rather than out of place, evoking a sense of pity. One had to admit, he was truly a master of manipulation. I patted his face. You have a way with sweet words, and I love hearing them. Who doesn't love a cute little puppy, especially one with a hint of tea flavor? No need to get too attached, just keep him around for a bit of fun. Later, Ji Baixiao sent someone to call me to the front courtyard to have a meal with them. When I arrived, I saw Ji Baixiao and Shinyu flirting there. I walked past as if I hadn't seen them, sat down, and began to eat. During the meal, everyone remained silent until Ji Baixiao finally spoke up. I plan to make a grand celebration for you and my wedding. What do you think, madam? I was taken aback. Taking a concubine with such a grand ceremony, did Ji Baixiao not fear being criticized for favoring the concubine over the wife and incurring the emperor's reprimand? I forced a smile. As long as the Marquis is happy. Sister, you look so displeased. Do you dislike me? But the Marquis and I truly love each other. Please don't blame us. Shinyu is like a delicate little white flower, easily blown over by the wind. Looking at her tea-like demeanor, I suddenly thought, when should I let Lin shutting out to meet her and see which of them is more tea? What kind of talk is this? Miss you, since the Marquis likes you, I can't say much. Then, as the Marquis wishes, you can be a concubine. Shen Yu, however, seemed hurt, on the verge of tears as she hid in Ji Beixiao's embrace. Qingyang, why must you say such things to humiliate Yua? I finally lost my temper as well. Humiliate? If we're talking about humiliation, nothing could be more direct than the humiliation I, as the official wife, feel when the Marquis insists on making a grand spectacle of marrying a concubine. I merely stated the facts. Is that considered humiliation? This is like the pig demon climbing the wall and blaming others for the fall. With that, I stood up and left, paying no mind to their stunned expressions. Probably they were wondering, what on earth is Jubaji, that day? As I was fiddling with the golden abacus, Shen Yu came looking for me. As soon as she entered, she sat down beside me, and when Granny Ann saw this, she frowned. Miss Lin is to enter the household as a concubine in the future. She should pay her respects when meeting the head wife. Shen Yu straightened her skirt, looking shy and bashful. The Marquis said that now that I'm carrying the heir to the Marquis's household, I don't need to kneel to just anyone. I stopped fiddling with the golden abacus and waved my hand to stop Nanian, who was about to speak. What brings you here, Miss Yu? The Marquis asked me to come discuss the matter of entering the household. You know, if we wait much longer, it will become inconvenient. As she spoke, she pointed to her own belly. Miss Yu, there's no need to involve me in such matters. You can speak with the house steward, and the rest can be arranged by the servants. Shen Yu lowered her head, lost in thought. Then I shall take my leave, sister. I hadn't given the matter much thought until that evening, when Ji Beixiao unexpectedly came to my quarters to demand an explanation, claiming that Shen Yu had started experiencing stomach pains after returning home and had nearly miscarried. He believed I was jealous of Shen Yu and wanted to harm his child. He looked at me with utter disgust. Yi Qingqing, when did you become so vicious? We've been married for a year. And you haven't given birth to a child, so you resent others for bearing children for me. I was truly angered to the point of laughter. He also knows we've been married for a year, but in that time, the number of times he entered my room didn't even add up to a month. I looked at Ji Beixiao, knowing full well that explanations were utterly meaningless to someone like him. Since the Marquis is convinced that I did it, then let us part ways and divorce. That will also free up the position of the main wife for Miss Shen Yu. What did you say, divorce? He was taken aback for a moment, then chuckled lightly. Yi Qingqing, are you in your right mind? Our marriage was decreed by the emperor. If you want a divorce, you'll have to ask the emperor if he agrees. Besides, your family's estate is gone. Where will you go after the divorce? Stop dreaming. You're a woman who's already been married. Do you think anyone would want you again? Do you still think you're... Slap. I raised my hand and gave him a resounding slap, putting an end to his incessant chatter. Yi Qingqing, how dare you hit me? What if I did hit you? I had no extra words. Only a pair of eyes as cold as ice staring at him. He and I were locked in a stalemate for a long time, and I did not yield in the slightest. It seemed my coldness made him hesitate, his hand pointing at me trembling slightly. Fine, fine, if you have the guts, show me what divorce looks like. After saying that, he stormed off in a rage. Since I mentioned divorce, Ji Beixiao never came to my courtyard again. I was quite content with the peace and quiet, seizing the time to start clearing things out and ordering Xiao Dao to begin packing our belongings. Has the emperor agreed? Nanian handed me a cup of tea and asked. I smiled. The empress had indeed sent me a message, telling me to stay calm, but it was all rather mysterious. I don't know, but when the empress handles things, it's always reassuring. Although my words were ambiguous, as long as the empress said to stay calm, I felt reassured. Xiao Dao immediately hopped over like a little bird. That's great. Now we won't have to live under their scrutiny anymore. You have no idea, miss. These past few days, the servants attending to that vixen have been acting so high and mighty, their noses practically pointing to the sky. Upon hearing this, I simply smiled it off, humming a tune and sipping my tea, feeling absolutely wonderful. The day of the grand wedding soon arrived. The entire Marquis's estate was draped in bright red, making it seem as though he were marrying a wife. To ensure Shen Yu would not be slighted, Ji Baixiao spared no expense, using the finest of everything. Even the grand ceremonies that had not been used for his official wife were now employed for taking a concubine. Moreover, the Marquis's invitations were sent far and wide, as if he were afraid no one would know how he doted on his concubine and neglected his wife. Shen Yu had no maternal family to return to, so there was no need for her to leave the mansion to welcome them. However, Ji Baixiao deliberately had the bridal sedan chair take a few extra turns around the city to make sure everyone knew. I was quite excited. It would be even better if the entire capital knew about it. Otherwise, if no one came to watch the show, wouldn't it be a waste of the stage that had been set up? By this time, the guest seats in the front courtyard were already filled to capacity, though most of them were there just to watch the spectacle. Marquis Ji is truly a man of style. Even taking a concubine with such extravagance, it's also thanks to the virtuousness of the Marquise. Look at how splendid this wedding is. This Marquis Ji really knows how to manage his wife. I must seek his advice on this someday. Ah, such an obedient and well-behaved wife, I want one too. Ha ha ha, ha. But I heard that the Marquis's wife seems to be preparing for a divorce. Divorce? Who did you hear that from? Don't joke around. Exactly. Look at which woman in the current dynasty has lived well after returning to her parents' home following a divorce. Besides, the Marquis's wife doesn't even have a family to go back to. What's the point of her divorcing? Oh, she could always remarry. Remarry? Would you want a woman who's been married before as your wife? Ha 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 ha. The front hall immediately erupted in a burst of uproarious laughter. However, the laughter stopped abruptly when they saw me. I came slowly from the backyard and walked leisurely into the front hall. Although I didn't hear exactly what sarcastic remarks those people had just made, I could roughly guess what they were gossiping about from the bursts of laughter. But I didn't mind. After all, today's farce really had to rely on these sharp-tongued people to spread the word. Just then, the bridegroom, who had circled the city several times, returned. Ji Baixiao led Shen Yu across the brazier and recited the vows. Upon entering again, they saw me sitting in the main seat of the front hall, leisurely sipping tea. Ji Baixiao couldn't say anything at the moment. After all, so many eyes were watching outside. He could only bring Shen Yu over. His cold, piercing eyes stared at me. Shen Yu looked at him with pitiful eyes. Qingyang, why have you come to the front? How interesting. He takes a concubine, and I, the mistress of the house, have to hide and avoid her. Without responding, I pointed at Shen Yu. You. Stay away from me. Don't stand so close. What if you bump into something again, and someone blames me for being malicious and trying to harm you? Then, she turned to look at Xiao Dao standing to the side. Xiao Dao, you should also stand a bit farther away. Xiao Dao immediately understood. Her expression as if she had encountered something dirty. What the young lady says is true. I am clumsy and rough-handed. If I accidentally bump into Miss Lin, and the child has any minor illnesses or misfortunes after birth, I'm afraid it would all be blamed on me. With that,